And then finally, after decide which working group work on what, then meaning the discussion of architecture, we can proceed to really define the protocols. That's stage 3. Okay, so one important thing for standardization process is companies, they are not individuals who participate, meaning although I participate in the 3GPP meetings, but what I'm presenting is my company, not myself. So what's important and who speak and who contribute is not based on individual delegates, is the company. The delegate just representing the company to contribute or to speak or to comment or agree or oppose some proposals. So the companies from all over the world and all the major telecommunication companies, including operators, vendors, and service providers, and even OEMs, they are in the meeting. And let's get back to the consensus driven approach, meaning every agreement is without substantive objections. Why do we need that? So that's because, as we said, these wireless communication, mobile communication system is a very complicated system with multiple players working together to form this ecosystem and to have this very complicated network. So whenever we need to release or build a new feature or build or a functionality on this network, every player, this feature or new functionalities has to be feasible for every players within the system. Meaning, if you have a feature that you're going to roll out, however, these decision on the protocols during the standardization process is based on only the chip vendors, service providers, but base station vendors, they don't sign up. But because they're minority, so if you do the majority rule, then their opinions will be ignored. However, if this is not feasible for base station, meaning base station, no matter what they do, they cannot really support these features, then can these features really be used by the customers? The answer is not, because you don't have the base station side support. So that's why consensus driven is 3GPP approach, because all the major players has to agree and consider this as a feasible option to be implemented. Otherwise, if you missing one side of the player, even if we made a decision for standardization, put it as a standardized protocol, the protocol is actually useless, because you already know that one side of the player will never implement it, no matter it's from cost perspective or even more basic feasibility perspective. Okay, so that's why 3GPP decision is always consensus driven, no substantial objections, because any objections, especially from the entire pack of some specific players, then that means you won't see these features being commercialized and deployed in the real network. Okay. And other than the industry, sometimes government entities or even academic are participating in this, because nowadays, especially at the point of turning to a new generation, every entity wants to contribute their opinions to shape our future. Okay. And more vertical industry representing their works directly to 3GPP, for example, NTN and 5G broadcast, meaning for example, broadcasting companies, they own all the broadcasting systems, but they usually don't care about the standardization process. However, in a 5G broadcast, we do see a few broadcasting companies, for example, the Europe broadcasting company and the Chinese counterpart, they also join. And NTN, we see a lot of satellite operators. So these we call like new vertical, meaning like one standalone system. Usually, they don't have delegate in the 3GPP, but nowadays we see more and more. So that means when 3GPP, the cellular communication is not only serving the cell phone and the cell phone's broadband communication, when it penetrate into more different verticals, we actually see the impact to those verticals. So they send delegates to 3GPP. Okay. So 3GPP started in 1998. Since then, all the major standard project has been deployed, and seamless migration from old to new mobile generations. So that's what we are seeing in the past, meaning from 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G. These technology keep advancing, and whenever new generation comes up, we actually see them in the market. So at least the major generations is never just a paper spec. It's actually affect our daily life, and and the features and new technologies are actually in the devices that you can purchase and use. Okay, and the new release comes out in average every 15 to 24 months, and this allows for reasonable fast standardization, deployment of new technologies, and strong commitment to the timelines guarantee reliable planning. So these 3GPP timelines is actually very important information for all the companies implementing product, because they are basically allocating the resources to implement the new features based on the 3GPP timeline. Meaning if 3GPP promise you to deliver a new spec by the end of this year, then all the companies which are interested in implementing these new features are looking at 3GPP's timeline and allocate their resource accordingly. For example, if I expect the release to come out at the end of this year, then I'll probably start to put the team to scope and look at what can be standardized and what can be the protocols to be released in by the end of year, probably like starting the second half of the year. So I get some understandings. Once your specification is out, then I can start to look at how my product can add new features to support the new functionalities provided by the new release of the standards. And then I also want to plan my release and commercialization of the new product. Depends on when I'm going to get a complete version of the standards. Okay. And because everything is planning according to the standard release timeline, so we say every new release comes out every 15 or 24 months. Once 3GPP determine this timeline, meaning I said in this new release will come up and finish at what time, 3GPP will do their best to meet this timeline, because if they have any delay, that means all the product development process every company is planned for, not only start implementing, even the commercialization timeline, even the whole roadmap and resource allocation can be affected. So that's why 3GPP actually made a pretty strong commitment to the timelines to guarantee reliable planning for all the players within the ecosystem. Okay, so that's what in the previous slide what we discussed is overall how does this meeting works, meeting and standard organization works from like the standard organization and the deliverables of those standard organizations perspective. So that's kind of an overview of that organization. But now we want to go back to the standard delegates or individual company perspective. How do we work as a delegate to bring companies, what do my company want, because I'm representing my company, to the standard meetings and eventually get what I want, or at least get something that basically satisfy the demands from my company. Okay, so we're turning from an overview perspective now to an individual company perspective. So what do we do as a standard delegate? The first thing is we are delegate for the company. So since we're representing the company instead of representing ourselves, so the first thing we need to do is understand internal requests and demand. And there are several different perspectives, especially for the big companies like Qualcomm. Because what do Qualcomm do? Qualcomm actually first, they produce the most advanced modem and cell phone chip. So they have product that usually in terms of technology, in terms of the new launching new generations of product, they usually are the first one, at least in 5G or LTE. So there's a demand from product. However, that's not the only business Qualcomm is doing, because Qualcomm also have a huge licensing business, meaning we produce patents, and we use these patents to charge other companies, including OEM or any other chip vendors or infra vendors. Okay. So actually, let me digress a little bit. So the licensing models for cell phones, I'm not an expert of the in terms of like regulations and patent laws, but what happened is not only Qualcomm which producing the chips, or MTK who is producing and design the chips have to pay the royalty. Actually, it's the OEM that pays the royalty. So if you think of in terms of what the industry in Taiwan, who is paying Qualcomm the royalties? MediaTek, of course, they have some, but surprisingly, a lot of OEMs have business with Qualcomm because of the product they are producing. Not OEM, even ODM has to pay Qualcomm. So that's basically that's how the patent law structured, so that the royalty is not the company who designed the chip, but the company who used the chip paying the royalty fees. So that's why when you see a few years ago, the litigation between Qualcomm and Taiwanese government is actually not the MTKs who is involved in this licensing fee charge. It's actually many other OEMs in Taiwan. Okay, so that's the business side, but from standard delegate perspective, we will receive two different demand from two different perspectives internally within our within our company. So first is the licensing business, and in a research branch. So basically, they want to produce patents. They have a lot of patents, and we want to, because all these patents are invented, of course, to make the system better, have better performance. And of course, it's have a better performance itself benefits Qualcomm already, because Qualcomm has a lot of cellular modem product. But having all these good innovations into the standards in the specification, that's also benefit Qualcomm's licensing business, because you will have more patent in the standards. So we actually have a special term for the patents in capture in the standard, that's called standard essential patent. And why we have a special name of these and everyone pays attention to that, we'll get to that later. So aside from licensing business, Qualcomm is also a chip vendor. So from product department, they also have very strong demand on the standard delegate, because what they want is to make sure that specification align with the product design and system tech architecture we already have, because we are not creating a product from nowhere. So basically, the system architecture and the design principles are inherited from the previous generation, and for our own company's preference and company's in special architecture. Okay, so because we have our ways to do things, then the best thing for us, meaning Qualcomm individual company perspective, is you have the specification design based on our system architecture. Okay, for example, can we support the new features with the current system architecture and hardware limitation? That's the best case, because we don't have to make fundamental changes for our hardware design, because any fundamental change for hardware design is usually complicated and costly, because you might driven up the required area or cost of implementing those circuit. And thus back to put too much restrictions on product limitation, meaning we want to be competitive so that our design can show up better than other companies' design, so we can persuade the customers, meaning OEMs, to choose our chip. However, as I already explained, there's a tension between what to specify and what to left for implementation. And from chip vendor perspective, any functionality that we are special at, meaning we are confident that we can have a better design than other chip vendors, we want to ask for more implementation flexibility so that we can have competitive edge. However, there's also another perspective of the same question, because sometimes if you specify too details, then I don't have the implementation flexibility to reduce the cost and simplify the design. Then a lot of custom approach, although they can, meaning they can have similar performance, but with much lower cost. And if this space is restricted by the it is ruled out by the specification, that's also something we don't like. Okay, and then is the performance requirement reasonable achieved with the current implementation? Because as I said, the standardization process also include many performance requirement, meaning I want to know at minimum how your chips or systems can work on in the cellular communication system. And based on these, the operators can decide their deployment accordingly. Okay. However, these requirements from chip vendor perspective, of course, that is a limitation, because my product and my algorithms need to satisfy these performance requirement. And if the performance requirement is too tight, either it's not feasible from our plan of implementation, or it can be very costly. That makes our overall production cost higher. Okay, and then finally, it's an interesting perspective because communication is two-sided, but channel is unknown for me, and also the base station, what base station is going to do, it's not all transparent information from UE perspective. And then the information, of course, channel, you need to do the channel estimation to get the information. But what base station is doing is not an available information. It's not immediately you know from the transmissions, but there are a lot of signaling in interface that base station can tell you what it is going to do. For example, the antenna control algorithm I discussed before. So if I know how many, if I know how much data base station is going to send to me, then or what is the special multiplexing, meaning multiple layer MIMO MIMO layers that base station is going to do, then of course I can safely determine how many antennas I'm going to use when the channel information is also available to me. Meaning if base station doesn't have too much data to send, then as long as base station already tell me that, oh, I'm going to send you with MIMO only 2 layers, then based on according to channel condition, I might be able to use just 2 out of my 4 antenna to receive the data. And however, if base station tell me that, oh, I'm going to always send you 4 layers of data until I tell you I'm going to change, then you will have to use 4 antennas to receive that because you're expecting you receive 4 layers of data. Okay, then how do you know that? Then we need to define a signaling interface so that the base station can tell UE in the coming, for example, several seconds, this is what I'm going to do, sending only 2 layers of data, or could be up to 4 layers of data. Okay, then when with this information, then from UE perspective, it will be much easier to manage how many antennas I'm going to use, because whenever I need whenever I can receive 4 layers, I'd better to stay in 4 layers, 4 antennas, so that I can receive 4 layers. However, if base station already tell me that, oh, only 2 layer data will come into you, then I can look at the channel condition and decide whether I'm going to use 4 antenna or 3 antenna or 2 antenna safely, because in this case I don't need to worry about the situation that I want to reduce the number of the antenna I'm using. However, I'm not sure whether base station will going to send me more than 2 layer data or not. Okay, so that's an example how the information exchange between the network and the UE can help UE. Okay, so after collecting all the internal demand and request from different department, from different perspective, then what's the next? Is can I just write the proposal according to whatever my companies want? Of course, that's my job, but that's not the best strategy, because remember, 3GPP decision is consensus based, meaning whenever I want my proposals to go through, every company has to agree and sign up for it. So if I just directly propose whatever my companies want, you can imagine that it can be opposed by many other companies with different stands. Okay. So drafting the proposal and come up with the options to propose is actually you can call it data fusion process. The internal request demand, of course, that's very important because that's what a company delegate should do. I mean, I need to fight for my company's preference and fight for my company's interest. However, there are also many different things. One thing is because this is a meeting and this is a collaboration with different companies, and in order for these meeting to work efficiently, one thing is very important is once anything is agreed, nobody can really touch it. Otherwise, 3GPP is consensus based, consensus driven. However, we've spent a lot of effort to achieve some agreement, and then a company is in the next meeting saying that, oh no, actually I changed my mind. I don't I'm opposing this agreement. If this can happen, then there's no ending of the discussion. So from 3GPP perspective, whatever the agreement on the accord is agreed on the record, then this has to be respected and followed for all the following meetings, unless there is a consensus to overturn the agreement, which is very, very, very rare. Okay, so the first thing, the very basic rule you need to follow is look at the previous agreement and make sure that anything you try to propose based on your company's demand or preference has to be aligned with the agreement or under the constraint of the previous agreement. There's no whenever you have contradictions with the previous agreement, it's almost guaranteed that your proposal can never go through. Okay, so previous agreement is what we have to follow, and we need to communicate with the internal team and see how they shape their or adapt their request or preference or demand so that it won't conflict with the previous agreement. Okay, so that's the basic part. However, again, 3GPP is a consensus-based discussion, and we'll use consensus-driven approach. So we need to get agreement from all the companies, and of course, getting agreement from all the companies is very complicated. So when we get to the discussion procedure, we're going to explain that you cannot get all the companies to sign up and agree with you. However, if you are standing on better ground, then you have a higher chance to get it. So we also want to look at the external opinions. How does company distribute? How's company's distribution across all the possible options, and what do they want, and how can we possibly adapt our proposals a little bit to persuade other companies to join us? Meaning, can we have a better proposals in terms of winning other companies' support? So we also need to take external opinions into consideration. And all these, meaning previous agreement, internal request or demand, and then external opinion distributions together, we can form the major opinion or main focus of our proposals, and then draft the proposals and contributions accordingly. Okay. So in order to getting all this together, one important thing we need to know, at least from internally, is not only what they want, but what they can accept. That's what I mean by flexibility. So understand internal opinions, that not just directly ask them, hey, what do you want? Actually understand why they want this, to understand how flexible we are, what can possibly be acceptable to us is very important. Okay. So all these will come up, will form a design space, and within the design space, that's how you come up and shape your proposals, so that we can have a better chance to start with by drafting a good proposals. Okay. Okay. Then that's before the meeting, and then what how 3GP works is basically that we have a contribution deadline before the meeting. So if the meeting start from for example, the meeting coming up is next Monday, we'll have usually the 3GP meetings from Monday to Friday, 5 days. And then if next Monday is the meeting time, usually most of the cases, the proposal or contribution deadline is last Friday. And you may ask why we need to have a week between submission deadline for your contributions and the actual meeting. What is this 1 week for? Remember, when you submit a contribution, mostly you're looking at previous agreement and internal feedback from the team members in your company, and what your company wants, and what your company looking for, and what your company can accept. And then externally, meaning other company's opinion or other company's thought, or what they might think is all from the previous meetings. And from the previous meeting to this meeting, it has been it can be like 2 months if it's like during summer or winter break. That's where we have sparser meetings, or it could be like a month, 3 or 4 weeks in between. But anyway, things can change. So this 1 week in between the contribution deadline and the actual meeting started is the period where you have all the company's contribution there in the server they submitted already. And then before the meeting actual start, you can look at all these contributions to understand what is the latest thought and latest stance and positions and the new proposals from other companies. Okay, so that is the contribution review process. The proposal submission deadline is usually 11 days before the meeting. That means meeting on Monday and the Friday before the previous week. That is the proposal submission deadline. Okay, and this window is for the delegate to review all the contributions from other companies. And from the contribution, you can see the proposals, because they'll explain what do they propose and why they propose that, and what's the benefit of these proposals. And then the other important thing is I need to understand the internal opinions towards these proposals, because the product team, I mean, they may have some implementation perspective on different proposals. If I didn't communicate with them and show them the proposals, I actually don't know, because I'm not the delegate is not the one that's implementing and design the product algorithms. So I need to understand and talk to those who are responsible for specific areas of specific functional blocks, and identify which proposals may affect which functional blocks, and talk to the relevant point of contact within our companies to collect their opinions towards these new proposals. Okay, so within this, I understand the proposal, understand other companies' proposals, and I already collect necessary information internally from the company's our company's view and what they thought and what's their plan. Then based on this information, I can set the strategy for the coming up meetings. That's also something I want to come up with before I actually be in the meeting venue. So what do? There are a lot of things we need to think about based on the information, meaning who proposed what we want, who proposed what, and what's our internal opinions and thoughts for all these different proposals. There are a few things we can think about based on this information. First, what's collision to build, and whether try to push through our specific proposals. Because remember, again, 3GP consensus based. If I'm alone and all the other companies are opposing me, then this is very, very, very hard to push through, because you need to go from one to like everyone agree with it. So that's too tough. So you need to think about how to earn support. And then that's also what I discussed in the previous slide, the external opinions. But looking at companies' new proposals, you can understand better their new positions. And once you understand the new positions, and probably from their proposal, try to infer what they can accept, then you can evaluate and look at the possibilities of building collisions and getting more support from other companies. And if and that's get to the delegates' own judgment. Looking at these, you can decide which proposals are very likely to go through. That's the proposals that your proposal is not very different from many other companies' proposals, and with your proposal or some changes to accommodate other companies, or just supporting other companies' proposal because they are so similar to us, and all these are the possible approaches. And then you get the majority, and once you're in majority, especially the majority to the level that only one or two companies left, and this is a good topics that you can expect everything aligned with what you want. Okay, but if you're in a worse situation, then you probably need more time to build more support, because if you start from just a few companies support you, and majority of company is like very different from what you stand, then that's probably a tougher job to go through. And because imagine that we're going to get to the how many meeting we have per year part, but we have like 15 months to 24 months to finish a release. So you actually can some of the proposals and ideas can be delayed a little bit later, because it depends on whether you need these as a foundation to discuss others, or you can actually divide discuss those things, delay those discussions without too much blocking other issues. Okay, so deciding which proposal you focus on to push through based on the contribution review result is one important thing you need to decide. And then your stance on each proposal, because if you see good chance to go through, of course you try to be stronger and insist. However, if you do not see too much chance, then you can kind of like soften your attitude, not necessarily compromise, but try to push it through to the next meeting. And then an important part is what to compromise. Compromise depends on the internal feedback, meaning how flexible we are, so that we can accept other companies' proposal, because it could be the case that many bad proposals, but you try to avoid the worst by supporting the less worst for you, the second worst for you. Because if you get to the worst proposal, then that's something absolutely you don't want, then you probably choose the second one, so that the second worst one go through, you reduce and control your damage. That's one way to compromise. Otherwise, the other way is your proposal contain a lot of things. Maybe you can give up a few things and replace it with other companies' proposals, and see if we can integrate all these into one new proposal. And although these proposals becomes like some of the part that you don't like, however, once it can go through, then you can keep whatever the ones that the items that's still in the proposal which you preferred. Okay. And then we also usually come up with a plan to how to bargain with other companies. And it could be, okay, I support you on that, you support me on these, or I compromise, I compromise on one topic or one issue, but please support me on the other issue, because whatever I compromise here can be compensated by our proposal accept in other issues. So from our product design perspective, all these combinations still feasible. Okay. Okay. So now we're getting to the meeting stage, because we've been through the internal internal opinion collection, and we, based on internal opinions, we draft the proposals and make contribution to the meetings. And then before the meeting, we review all the contributions. Then the next is what actually happened in the meeting. So in the meeting, we have online discussions and in external collaboration as the most important factors and what we are doing in the meeting. Okay, so look at this is like I have done all the preparations. So I've written my script for these performance. By performance, I mean these 5 days of online meetings. Then what should I do? Should I just follow the script? Actually, not. It's good to have a plan, but it's not necessary you should follow all the plans precisely what you're planned for, because during the meeting you can find also more informations and more change of position or change of thought during the meeting. Okay, but let's look at what we do actually in the meeting. So first, we want to convincing other company to support our proposals based on what we plan. And these planning also, of course, involving understand their stance and also understand how they may or may not like some proposals. And then sometimes we propose new stuff and based on our original proposal, but this is new. Remember, we submit the contribution before the submission deadline, and during this week of reviewing other companies' proposals and collect internally our team's opinion, I probably can come up with kind of like new proposals to gain more support or secure whatever the core interest we have. And these are the new proposals. It's not complete new, but I'll call it fusion proposals from other companies' perspective. So I need to explain all these to them during the meeting times. Okay, so we have either convincing people to accept our proposal or come with new proposals and try to gain more support by the new proposals. But all this actually boils down to the complete set, meaning within a topics, what we're trying to push for and what we can compromise, what we try to convince others, what we probably can allow others to convince us so we can gain some more leverage. So all these are bargaining and negotiation of lines. And with all this preparation, when we get to online discussion, meaning in the meeting menu, you have a venue, you have a chair hosting the meetings, and because topics rotate, so there's a specific time allocated to these topics, and these are the online discussion time. So what do we do there? We present our company's position and provide arguments so that we can persuade company that we haven't talked to and persuade chair to help us to push through. And how this meeting and chair and delegate works, we're going to explain later. And then we also want to understand relevant proposals and who is supporting it, because online meeting, we can formally see who supports what and what their new stand is. And chair will also want to consolidate a few different options into like one or two so that the chair can push for the progress. That's part of the chair's power. We'll explain that later. And then we're, of course, discussing online by the guidance of chair. Probably chair will come with, oh, these two proposals, although they are different, but if we take A from proposal 1, B from proposal 2, then we probably can come up with a new proposal. Then is it acceptable to anyone? Something like this can happen. So this is like bargaining in the online discussion. Okay. So I think we can take another break and come back in 10 minutes.